Hey, Pops, what's your call sign? Let me guess. Something real terrifying, like nap time? The voice sliced through the noise of the anchor like a blade through still water, loud, effortless, laced with the unearned confidence of youth at the height of its power. A few heads turned. The jukebox in the corner had just finished a mournful Merle Haggard tune and hadn't started another, so the words landed in a pocket of rare quiet and expanded to fill every corner of the room. The man at the end of the bar did not look up. His name was Raymond Earl Colt, and he was 83 years old. He sat on a cracked leather bar stool with the stillness of a man who had learned long ago that the world's noise was not directed at him, or if it was, that it deserved no particular answer. He wore a faded canvas jacket the color of old moss, soft with decades of wear, and beneath it a plain work shirt the gray of weathered cedar. His jeans were worn white at the knees. His boots were resoled at least twice, the leather cracked along the instep in the particular way leather cracks when it has been wet and dried and wet again 10,000 times. On the bar in front of him sat a glass of bourbon, untouched for several minutes, and beside it a small unit patch, a black and white skull over crossed tridents, worn nearly smooth, that he'd set down when he came in, the way some men set down their keys. His hands rested flat on the bar. They were mapworks of wrinkles and liver spots, the knuckles like polished river stones, but they were perfectly steady. Not the steadiness of tension, the steadiness of a thing that had forgotten how to tremble. Behind him, the young man who had spoken was not finished. His name was Petty Officer Second Class Derek Marsh, and he was 26 years old and had the kind of body that looked engineered rather than grown, wide through the shoulders, narrow at the waist, with forearms roped in muscle below his rolled sleeves. He wore civilian clothes but carried himself in the unmistakable posture of someone who had been told, repeatedly and correctly, that he was exceptional. There was a naval special warfare insignia tattooed on the inside of his left forearm, the trident dark and sharp against tanned skin. 3 of his teammates sat behind him at a high-top table, beers in hand, already grinning at what they sensed was coming. The anchor was their regular spot when they were between deployments, a dark wood and neon sign bar 2 blocks from the waterfront that smelled permanently of spilled beer and sawdust, and the particular kind of honesty that only comes from cheap whiskey. The floors were sticky in a way that suggested they had always been sticky and had made peace with it. The neon Bud Light sign above the bar buzzed with an insectile hum. A ceiling fan stirred the warm air without cooling it. Marsh had spotted the old man when he walked in, the faded patch on the bar, the too still posture, the bourbon he wasn't drinking. Something about the whole picture had irritated him in the way that unexplained stillness sometimes irritates men who are not yet still. Seriously, old-timer. He was louder now, turning slightly toward his teammates. Performing, "We're all operators in here. We don't mind. What'd they call you? The librarian? Grandpa Actual?" A round of laughter from the table. A man nursing a beer 2 stools down stared very hard at the label on his bottle. The bartender, a woman in her 40s named Carol with tired eyes and a bourbon-stained bar rag over her shoulder, didn't smile. She had seen this particular kind of young man before. She began to wipe down the bar with slow, deliberate strokes, moving toward the old man the way you move toward a thing you want to protect without making it obvious. Raymond Colt raised his eyes. They were pale blue, the color of a winter sky the moment before the temperature drops to something serious. Not cold themselves, but suggestive of profound cold at depth. The way the surface of a lake suggests everything underneath it. He looked at Marsh the way a man looks at something he has already assessed, already filed, and already made peace with. "I'm fine right here, son," he said. His voice was a low rasp, gravel rolling down a dry hill. Quiet enough that Marsh had to lean in slightly to hear it. "You go ahead and enjoy your evening." Marsh stared at him for a moment. There was something in those eyes that gave him a half-second of pause. Not fear exactly, more like the feeling of stepping on ice and hearing it tick before deciding it will hold. Then his friends laughed again, and the moment passed. "Oh, I'm enjoying it just fine." He stepped closer, dropping one elbow on the bar beside the old man, closing the distance with casual ease, the way large men do when they want to make space feel smaller. But seriously, every operator has a call sign. "I'm Hammerhead." He gestured at his teammates in turn. "That's Viking." "Cowboy." "Torch." "We earned ours." "You must have had one back in what? Korea?" More laughter. "Or wait, were you in the Spanish-American War?" Raymond didn't answer. He picked up his bourbon and drank half of it in one unhurried sip. Marsh looked back at his crew, spreading his arms like a man presenting evidence. "He won't tell us." "What's the matter, Pops?" "Classified?" He turned back, leaning in further, his voice dropping into something more intimate and more contemptuous. "Or maybe they just called you Private Nothing, and you've been embarrassed about it ever since." His hand came down on the unit patch. Not a grab, not a snatch, just a single finger, pressing down on the worn cloth of the skull and trident's patch as if to examine it, the way a man touches something to signal that he could take it if he wanted to. The bar vanished, not slowly. Completely. The neon buzz cut out. The sticky floor dissolved. The smell of cheap whiskey and sawdust replaced itself in an instant with something else. The metallic edge of blood, the suffocating green weight of jungle air, the particular stench of cordite and standing water and fear. He was 19 years old, and he was lying in 4 inches of standing water in a shell crater northeast of Da Nang, and the rain was coming down in sheets through triple canopy jungle, so thick the sky was more rumor than fact. His face was 3 inches from the water's surface, and he was watching a single leaf on the branch above him to read the wind because his hands were shaking too hard to read a compass. Not from fear, from cold, from blood loss. From the fact that Hernandez was in the water 6 feet to his left, with his eyes open and his chest not moving, and had been that way for 11 minutes. The patch had not existed yet. Then it would not exist for another 14 months. Not until the men who survived what was about to happen got drunk together in a tent in Quang Tri province, and one of them took a needle and a bottle of drawing ink and burned the design into their skin one by one. A covenant sealed in pain. A covenant with the men who were not there to receive it. Hernandez would have been third in line. He would have sat on the ammo crate with that lopsided smile and said the needle didn't hurt, and everyone would have known he was lying, and no one would have said so. Raymond had made the shot. The one Hernandez had talked him up to the position to take, whispering the range and the wind call with a voice so calm it sounded like a man narrating a dream. The one that ended the thing that would have ended the platoon. He had made it at 460 yards in a monsoon with hands that would not stop shaking, reading the wind from a single trembling leaf the way a man reads a letter he has received bad news from. And afterward he had crawled through the standing water to Hernandez and held his hand in the warm rain and watched the sky go gray and then dark. And the sound of rotors filled the jungle like a promise kept too late. That was the last time his hands had shaken. Ever. The memory vanished. The jukebox had started again. Conway Twitty, low and sad. The neon buzzed. Marsh's finger was still on the patch. Raymond did not move. His expression had not changed. But something in the room had shifted, like the air pressure change before a storm. Subtle and total. Carol, the bartender, felt it in her back teeth. She had already been watching. Now she set down her rag, quietly, and walked to the far end of the bar where the old phone was mounted to the wall beside the back bar cooler. She had a number. She'd had it for 6 years, written on a piece of masking tape stuck to the inside of the cabinet, above the phone. Put there by the bar's previous owner, Pete Gallagher, who had told her, "You'll know when." She'd never had to use it before, but she knew, with the sudden clarity of a person watching something irreversible approach, that she knew now. She picked up the phone. She dialed. It rang twice. A board duty officer's voice answered. Naval Special Warfare Command, Coronado, Petty Officer Reyes. "My name is Carol Hutchins. I'm the manager of the Anchor Bar in San Diego. I have a situation here I don't know how to describe, except that you should probably know about it." She paused, watching across the bar as Marsh picked up the patch and turned it over in his fingers. "I have an older gentleman here. His name is Raymond Colt. And one of your seals is..." The silence on the other end was sudden and absolute. It lasted 4 full seconds. When Petty Officer Reyes spoke again, his voice was a completely different instrument, tighter, urgent, stripped of the duty officer monotone as cleanly as a coat being shrugged off. "Say that name again, ma'am." "Raymond Colt." Another silence. Shorter. "What's the address?" She gave it. "Do not," he stopped. Started again. "Please make sure no one touches him. Please, we're sending someone." The line didn't go dead. She could hear him already moving, already saying something to someone else in the room, his voice rising. She hung up and walked back to the bar. Behind her, she did not hear him call the duty office at Naval Station North Island, which relayed the name to Commander Jason Volk at Naval Special Warfare Group 1, who put down his phone so abruptly it rattled on the desk and said to his yeoman, "Find the Admiral. Don't wait. Find him now." She did not hear Vice Admiral Charles Merritt, who had been about to leave his office for a dinner he was already dreading, stop with his hand on his cover and go very still when he heard the name, and then say, quietly, to his driver, the bar, on 4th, "Now, call ahead to the gate." She did not hear any of the phones that rang in the next 4 minutes in a chain reaction that originated in a single name spoken by a tired bartender into an old phone and ended in the controlled scramble of men who understood exactly and completely what that name meant. She walked back. She refilled Raymond's bourbon without being asked. She did not look at Marsh. Marsh, for his part, had elevated. He had gone from finger on patch to holding the patch up in 2 fingers, examining it with exaggerated theatrical interest, and his voice had found its performance register, louder, directed outward, meant to be heard and enjoyed by the room. "This is from Bud S., right? Every SEAL candidate gets one of these. You probably bought this at a surplus store." He set it down directly in front of Raymond. "I'm asking you one more time, old-timer. What's the call sign?" Raymond looked up at him. Not with anger, not with pleading, with the expression of a man reading the weather. "You wouldn't know it," he said. Marsh's jaw tightened. "Try me." He put his hand on Raymond's shoulder. The front door of the Anchor came off its hinges. Not literally, but the way it opened, driven by 2 men in naval service dress blues who spread it wide and stepped to either side, it had the impact of a door that had ceased to think of itself as an obstacle. Behind them, Vice Admiral Charles Merritt walked through without breaking stride. He wore 4 stars on his shoulder boards. His cover was under his arm. His face was the face of a man running on controlled fury, not at the bar, not at the crowd, at something precise and specific he had not yet reached. He did not look at Marsh. He did not look at the table of operators, who had gone very quiet in the way that junior enlisted go quiet when the air in a room changes composition. He walked directly toward the man at the end of the bar with the steady, purposeful stride of someone who has known exactly where he was going since the moment he got the call. He saw Marsh's hand on Raymond's shoulder. His eyes, which had been controlled and searching, went narrow and very cold. Marsh felt it. He removed his hand. It happened fast, involuntarily, the way you pull your hand from a hot surface before your brain has issued the instruction. Vice Admiral Merritt stopped in front of Raymond Colt. He squared his shoulders. He brought his right hand up in a salute, crisp, precise, perfectly vertical. The kind of salute that does not belong to muscle memory alone, but to something older and more deliberate. He held it. 1 second. 2, 3, 4. Directed at the 83-year-old man in the faded canvas jacket and the resoled boots. The bar was not quiet. The bar was something beyond quiet. The total absence of sound that occurs when every person in a room simultaneously stops breathing. The jukebox had ended between songs. The neon sign buzzed on, but seemed to do so apologetically. At the high-top table, Viking had set down his beer without knowing he was doing it. Cowboy had stopped mid-sentence. Torch was staring with an expression that mixed disbelief with something that looked, slowly, like vertigo. Marsh's face had gone the color of old paper. Raymond Colt returned the salute with a hand that did not tremble. Then, he nodded once and said, "Charlie, you didn't have to do that." "Yes," said Vice Admiral Merritt, lowering his hand. "I absolutely did." He turned then, and for the first time, he looked at Marsh. He looked at him for a long moment, measuring something. Then he reached into his jacket and produced a small card and held it out. His aide stepped forward and took it, understanding what was to happen. But first, Merritt turned back to face the room. "My name is Vice Admiral Charles Merritt, Naval Special Warfare Command. The man at this bar is Master Chief Petty Officer Raymond Earl Colt, United States Navy, retired." His voice filled the room without effort, not loud, but precise. The voice of a man accustomed to rooms paying attention. "I'm going to tell you who he is. I'm going to do it because someone in this room asked, and because the men who know this name would want it said out loud." He drew a breath. Master Chief Colt served 4 deployments in Vietnam between 1965 and 1971, attached to Naval Special Warfare, MACV-SOG, and classified units whose designations I am not authorized to speak in a civilian establishment. He was awarded the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor Device, 3 Purple Hearts, and the Navy Cross, the last awarded for an action in Cung Tra Province in November of 1968, in which he extracted 7 wounded personnel from an ambush position under direct enemy fire, alone, over the course of 4 hours, despite a gunshot wound to the left thigh that subsequently required partial muscle reconstruction. The room had gone so still that the sound of someone shifting their weight on a bar stool was audible across it. He completed the first qualification assessment for what became Naval Special Warfare Development Group and helped write the standards that your instructors still use today. He paused. He holds a confirmed kill record in the MACSOG theater that remains, to this day, classified at the request of 3 consecutive administrations. Another pause. The enemy in his primary theater of operation had a name for him. They shared it across radio frequencies, across borders, in briefings and whispers. They called him Bung Ma, the ghost. He let that sit for a moment. When he operated at the command level, when he was coordinating assets, when the net came alive and everyone on it understood that something precise and final was about to happen, the call sign was Ghost Actual. He looked directly at Marsh. "The call sign you asked about as a joke." Marsh stood perfectly still. His face was not ashen now, It was past ashen, past color entirely, the particular blankness of a man who was performing a fast and terrible recalculation. Petty Officer Marsh. Merritt's voice did not change temperature. You'll report to Commander Volk at 0600. I'll leave the specifics to him. That's all for tonight. Marsh nodded. He could not seem to produce words. He nodded again, turned, and walked toward the door. His teammates did not follow immediately. Viking stood up first, came to the bar, and stood briefly at attention. He didn't say anything. He held it for 3 seconds and walked out. Cowboy and Torch did the same, one after the other, quietly, without ceremony. Raymond had watched all of this with the same expression he had worn since Marsh first spoke to him. Unmoved, not cold, simply present. Then, he slid off his bar stool. He walked to the door, unhurried, and caught Marsh in the parking lot, where the young man was standing beside a truck with his hands on the roof and his head down. Raymond came to a stop beside him and placed one hand, gentle, unambiguous, on the same shoulder he had grabbed. Marsh looked up. "That gear you carry," Raymond said. His voice was still low, still level. "It's good gear. I've seen what the teams can do now. It's extraordinary." He paused. "But the gear doesn't know the wind, and the rank doesn't hold the line. The only thing that holds the line is what's already in you before you ever put the uniform on." He looked at the young man for a moment. "You've got fire. That's good. Fire's the start. Don't let it make you blind." He patted the shoulder once, the way you'd pat the shoulder of a nephew you had not given up on. Then he walked to his truck, got in, and drove away. Inside, Carol had poured 2 fingers of bourbon she hadn't been asked for and set it where Raymond had been sitting. She looked at it for a moment. Then she set the unit patch beside it, which he'd left behind, and thought about all the things a piece of worn cloth could weigh. It was 9 weeks later that Derek Marsh walked into a diner 6 blocks from the base on a Tuesday morning. He was thinner than he had been. The swagger was gone, replaced by a posture that was still straight. The training didn't leave, but stripped of the particular energy that had filled too much space. He looked like a man who had been taken apart by something and put back together slightly differently. Not worse. Just rearranged. Raymond Colt was in a corner booth with a cup of coffee and a paperback novel. He didn't look up when the bell above the door rang, but something in him registered the weight of the approaching footsteps and the way they slowed. Marsh stopped at the edge of the booth. He held his cover in both hands. "Master Chief Colt." His voice was quieter than it had ever been in the anchor. "I came to apologize. I don't have a speech. I just needed to say I'm sorry. For what I said. For what I touched. For not knowing enough to know what I didn't know." Raymond looked up at him. Those pale blue eyes. Winter sky, deep. He looked at the young man the way he had looked at that leaf in the jungle, reading what was real, not what was performed. He slid the menu across the table. "Sit down," he said. "Coffee's good here." Marsh sat. They didn't say much. The coffee was good. Outside, the morning traffic moved past the window, indifferent and ordinary, full of people going about the quiet business of their lives, carrying things no one could see, histories no one thought to ask about. There are men who walk among us every day with the weight of whole wars in their hands, and they carry it quietly, and they ask for nothing, and they wait without complaint for the world to learn what it has standing in front of it. If you were moved by Raymond's story of quiet courage and timeless wisdom, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to Veterans Valor for more stories of America's unassuming heroes.